Hi, this is Dr. Randy Hurst. I'm doing these basic education videos, and remember, I'm not providing any treatment, any recommendations, or any things that I talk about that you decide to take on. Please know you're doing kind of at your own risk. If things get bad for some reason, get help, or basically slow down, back off. And I always tell people, even when I'm treating them, if it gets too much, back away. Don't get overwhelmed. And in this case, where you're just taking something off of a YouTube video, please, if it is too much, get professional help, because I can't be in a position to provide that for you. Okay, now this is on addiction to avoidance. What the heck is that? So if you've seen any of the videos on the monster making, some of the videos have to do with the monster of anxiety, of uncertainty, of fear, and how that can take over. So we usually think of addiction as what I refer to as a go addiction, going toward something that feels positive. And the really easy way to think about that is drugs, but there's other things like spending, having what you want, to a body image. The kind of eating disorder is a focus on the need to get things to look right. Gambling, now everybody's talking about addiction to cell phones or screen time, videos, games. The other day, my wife and I were walking on what's called the green belt, and so there's this wonderful trails right along the river, down by the zoo. It's excellent. Truly, over 90% of people were staring at their screens. I mean, I saw groups of 6 and 8, where there's like couples, 2 or 3 sets of couples with their various kids. And the kids are having zero interaction with adults because the adults are not even interacting with each other. They're all on their screen. And it's just like, really? But those are the go toward kinds of addictions that can happen to people. Whereas I'm realizing that anxiety disorders are really a lot about getting away from types of addictions. And there's not in a sense, there's not a physiological dependence. If you saw the video about dependence and addiction, there's not a withdrawal from the activities that come from anxiety. The withdrawal is the reward. The avoidance, the pulling back and avoiding situations that cause anxiety or cause fear is the addiction itself. So, for example, people with histories of trauma that is just so overwhelming to remember the things that happened to them. Soldiers, rape victims, abuse victims, molestation victims. One of the things that can happen is trying to push all of that experience out of existence. And in the short term, it seems to work. And it's rewarding to do things that never let those experiences come up to consciousness again. The trouble is, people's lives get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to avoid having things that might remind them, or avoid having those feelings, or avoid having the thoughts, the memories, the dreams that come out. And of course, one of the dilemmas is that if you open the door to remembering those things, it can be overwhelming. That's why one needs to go very slowly in the process, or get help. one of the things that I used to have people do is write a little bit. You pick a time every day or, every few days, but have it on the schedule and spend a little time writing. And what we've found, and a lot of people reported, is that doing that and knowing that it would happen allowed for more time of the day that they didn't have to worry about things jumping into their consciousness, taking over for them. So one of the things that I say to people is, and this is a little bit extreme, but we can't feel and think at the same time. Feelings can take over quickly, but they can't think. And so thinking, remembering, spending time writing about, putting it in words, allows the thinking to have a little bit of the upper hand. And in time, the feelings get settled through. The thinking and putting in words help to give context, to see different sides, to, in a sense, sometimes even see the value of remembering, especially if somebody decides that in order to, as a person that I recently met said, in order to honor the people who didn't live, he was in the service, he lived not just for him, but for them too. But that was a way of helping to get through, to spend time with, and not just avoid. So people who, I've said this, I've given this example in another video, my aunt who, her life became smaller and smaller and smaller so that she wouldn't feel fear, had an experience walking to the store where she almost got hit by a car. She never went to the store again. Walking on her side of the highway, but having a car come too close to her, going fast around a corner, she stopped going for walks on her side of the highway even. Then, gardening, which she loved for years, had the thought cross her mind, what are the chemicals the condo association was putting on the lawn? There were no weeds. She stopped going out and sitting on the lawn to do her little decorative gardening area, or flower garden area. So her life was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. She was addicted to avoiding feeling that fear. She lost a relationship. It was causing problems where people were criticizing or encouraging. It was just overwhelming for her. Hoarding is a kind of addiction to avoidance, in that case of feeling kind of insecure. Had a person who, in losing his job, losing a full career, started just hoarding because he was afraid that he was going to even lose more, and if he didn't have enough at the time that he might be affected again by a loss, then he would be destitute. He would be in desperate situation. So he just was collecting and keeping, holding on to more and more and more. Is that one an avoidance? Well, it's an avoidance of the feeling of insecurity, of uncertainty, of fear. Was there a lot of going toward in collecting these things? Not really, because he wasn't going out and going toward. He wasn't going out and spending because he what? Had not much money. So it was mostly an avoidance of fear. How do we live with, understand our fears, and manage so that we don't have to go to extremes to avoid feeling that? That's the key. So if you have an addiction to avoiding something, like say, sometimes people will avoid being around others because in the back of their head, they're focused on what do others think of them? How do others judge them? That's a social anxiety or a social phobia. And So one of the things that people in that situation do is avoid being in situations where they could be judged. Is that a problem? Well, depends on how lonely they get. You know, some people are good alone, but their families might not be good with constricting their lives as well. How does a family member go ahead with their life when there's this difference? How does a spouse, do they restrict their lives as well, or do they become more independent? What does that do to the relationship? It can put it very much at risk. So think about, are there things that you do? I just thought of another interesting dilemma between, are you going toward or going away from? How about the obsessive kind of compulsive cleaner that just has to have everything clean? We now know that there's quite a bit of damage from too much cleaning of a home, between the cleanliness of the body, where you lose some of the good bugs and not just the bad ones, the over cleanliness of the environment, which raising kids, this is where it happens a lot. Mothers, parents want to raise their kids in a very clean, safe environment. And the trouble is the kids' immune systems don't learn what is good and bad. And so they have more allergies. They have more problems with things like asthma. It's kind of important, especially for little kids, to be around things that aren't them, and so that they can learn how to fight them off. But the parent who is avoiding any harm weirdly can end up causing harm. So please consider, do you have things that you do to avoid that is causing problems? And consider this idea of addiction to avoidance, and that trying to do differently will raise the fears. And that increase in fear isn't necessarily a bad thing if it's a middle ground. I mean, I would never encourage anybody to go headlong into danger, but there's a big middle that is healthier than going headlong into danger or avoiding into a whole nother set of problems. Think about it, see if it fits, decide whether you want to try battling your own fears on little bits of change, and then grow that change over the next year or two. Think about how long it's taken to develop a problem, and take at least half that time working on the solution and battling within your own fear. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope it makes sense. And check out any of the other videos. I'm hoping to get back into a rhythm again.